Centre.
I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the debate, Mr. Speaker. I must confess the last few weeks leading up to Halloween and after, I feel like I've been participating in some kind of Revenge of the Reform Party performance. You know, the wheat board is gone, the gun registry is about to go. It's a strange form of triumphalism. My friend from Crowfoot there is getting his exercise and applauding. I think, Mr. Speaker, what Canadians are looking for is public policy that's based on evidence, that's based on the facts, that's based on a reasonable assessment of risk, that's based on the realities of the situation, and that's based on a consistent sense that we have as a country that what we can do to reduce violence, what we can do to reduce the loss of life is worth doing, as long as it's not too intrusive, as long as it's not unreasonable, as long as it's reasonably fair and equitable. I'm not here to defend all of the expenditures in the registry. I think it's way, way less than the numbers that have been thrown out by the government over a 10-year period. No doubt some of that money could have been spent differently and perhaps even more wisely. That's really not the issue. Those are now sunk costs, Mr. Speaker. We're not going to get them back. No effort by the Reform Party on the other side is going to get them back. All the enthusiasm that they have for the rights of gun owners is not going to change the situation. We register our cars. In many cities, we register our bicycles. We register our cats and our dogs. We register a great many things, Mr. Speaker. If the government would have its way, we're going to be registering canoes, if you can believe it. So there's lots of things that we register. Why is the one thing that the Conservatives have now developed this intense ideological objection to is the notion that we would ask people to simply register their guns, when we know that guns, in addition to killing ducks and moose and other animals, also kill people. Yep. And we also know that long guns are in the case of rural suicides, for example, long guns are used in suicide, and long guns are used in cases of domestic violence. We know that last year, when responding to calls on domestic violence, Mr. Speaker, 7,000 registered certificates were pulled after police officers attended on the scene involving domestic violence. 7,000. So when members opposite say it's never stopped a crime, it's never reduced a crime, the expensive and ineffective, blah, 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 the mantra over there, how they describe it, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, it probably has saved some lives. The evidence would suggest that, and certainly the evidence of those who are speaking in favor of it would suggest it as well. Je vais citer par exemple, Monsieur.
For example, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to mention when we consider the opinions of Canadians based on the reality of the situation, I'll mention what Mr. Denis Côté said, who's the president of the the Quebec Police Association. He says that guns and long guns represent many of the weapons found at the site of crimes in this country. They are the most likely to be used in the situation of domestic violence, suicides, particularly among young people, and other crimes. The police, Mr. Côté clearly states, need the registry.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a practical guy, so when I talk to the chief of police in the city of Toronto or in the city of Vaughan or in the city of Markham, first question I always ask them is, what about all the fuss about the gun registry? Is it useful to you? Do you need it? And they've said, yes, we do. It doesn't save the world. It's not going to make all the difference. We can't rely on it entirely. It's an imperfect vehicle. But we need it, and we use it, and we don't want to lose it. Mr. Speaker, when I was Premier, there was a terrible murder in Ontario of a young woman. And her mother, Priscilla de Villiers, became very active as an activist dealing with guns. And this is what she says. The costs of maintaining the registry are modest, less than $4 million a year. That's the accurate figure. While the risks of eliminating the registry are enormous. And she asked a painful question. I think the members of the House need to listen to it. Would a gun registry have saved my daughter or so many countless others across the country? We don't know. She goes on to say, no law can prevent all tragedies, but a gun control law which includes registration and is rigorously implemented makes it harder, not easier, for dangerous people to get firearms. Well, we have a head of a police association in Quebec. We have the chiefs of police across the country. We have someone like Priscilla de Villiers. We have the emergency doctors who said the same thing. Mr. Drummond, who's the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians, who's an assistant coroner in Perth, Ontario, just down the highway, he says, so we will now all be willing participants in a social experiment that will undoubtedly place Canadian lives at risk. Our question to our government is that relative to the perceived inconvenience, and that's really what members on the opposite side are talking about. It's inconvenient. It's inconvenient. Compared to that cost, what will be the true cost in direct human suffering, of their ideologically driven and scientifically bankrupt legislation? Canada's emergency physicians remain steadfastly supportive of the principles of the Firearms Act and the gun registry. Mr. Speaker, how many times have I heard the Minister of Public Safety say he's speaking for victims? The Ombudsman for the victims, Sue Sullivan, stated categorically that she was in favor of the registry and thought it would save lives. Hear, hear. The point for us, Mr. Speaker, is just 3 or 4 weeks ago we had a very moving debate in this House on suicide. You have a gun around, registered or not, that gun is what's going to be used to take your life. Kids get access to it. The thing about the registry is it's supposed to hold gun owners accountable for the use of the gun. To me, this is not an ideological question. It's a purely factual one. We spent the money. It's $4 million a year. Are we, in fact, likely to see some lives lost as a result of a greater access to firearms as a result of this repeal? And I think anyone looking at it would say, probably yes. That's enough for me. But what really gets me about this government is it's not enough for them to say, we as a government will not use this registry. It's not enough for them to say, we as a government don't think this registry is right. This is a government that does not only want to control its present and its mandate, it wants to control the future. It's going to conduct a bonfire, Mr. Speaker, so that no one else will ever be able to do such a registry. Shame. That's what the minister said. We want to stop any other government ever. What? Based on evidence? No. What if we find, in fact, that it is useful? What if we find other means of registering? What if we find less intrusive and less inconvenient ways of registering? Are they saying they're going to be opposed to that and stop that as well? And they also say, as my other colleagues have mentioned, on va dire aux provinces de Québec.
We'll tell the province of Quebec that you can't do this either. We know very clearly from listening to the Minister of Justice of the province of Quebec that they want to set up a registry. They want to have the means to do so.
Government opposite, please abandon your ideological ways. Stop pretending you can control the world, control all things, and control the future. Show a little humility in this legislation. Bring it down to size. At least reflect the fact that most Canadians on this legislation don't actually agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I do have a couple of questions for the leader of the official, not the official opposition, sorry, the third party. I do have a couple of questions for him. And And actually, my first question has to do with the mandate that Canadians have given all of us in this House. Some of us a stronger mandate than others in terms of the seats. When we talk about the Long Gun Registry and the view that Canadians across this country, from east to west to the north part of Canada, have had in opposition to this Long Gun Registry, whether they were Conservatives, NDP or Liberals, it was overwhelmingly opposed. When will the Liberals look at what Canadians actually want instead of talking about defending ideology? The other question, Mr. Speaker, I would like him to comment on is the Long Gun Registry does nothing to keep guns out of individuals' hands. He referred to suicide. How can the Long Gun Registry keep any guns out of any individual's hands? That's my question.
Member for Toronto Centre.
Well, let me just relate the fact that I gave the honourable member. Perhaps she didn't hear me when I said that in responding to concerns about domestic violence, what I've been told, and based on reliable information that I have, is that police have pulled at least 6,000 or 7,000 certificates. So they're pulling guns away from people who they think are likely to do harm in a domestic situation. She also raises a very interesting question about what is the nature of your mandate. 24% roughly of Canadians who were entitled to vote voted for the party of the member opposite. I would strongly suggest that she not make the terrible mistake, which many governments have made over the course of history, of overreading your mandate. Do not overread. Don't let the member overread the mandate. Mr. Speaker, don't let your own party overread the mandate which they've been given by the Canadian people. That would be a terrible mistake.
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
I've lived with the issue of the gun registry since it was implemented. We saw the ham-fisted way that it was brought in, which caused a great deal of alienation. I have to say that in my office over the last 7 years, the issues regarding the registry have dropped to zero. People are upset about the licensing. People are upset about the various processes. The questions we had about the registry have pretty much vanished. But in response to the Conservative member, I sat down with a police officer and I said, I need an answer. Do you use the registry, yes or no? Give me the straight answer. And she said to me, in a case of domestic violence, we need to know whether there are 4 or 5 guns in the house. It's not enough to know he's a gun owner. We need to know if there's a 5th gun. If we don't know where that 5th gun is, people die. That is what police officers in the city of Timmins told me. They told me that to my face, and I'd like to ask my honourable colleague why he thinks that the party opposite continually undermines the legitimacy of the police's point of view on this issue.
Member for Toronto Centre.
Well, I think that's going to be a significant issue in the months ahead. Unfortunately, we have a government that has become captive to an ideology, and when you actually look at it and you talk to the police people, you're going to get different opinions. My colleague from McLeod was raising an issue of a police officer in his constituency. I fully respect that. The Minister of State for Finance. There are going to be different opinions from police officers. I can only tell you the overwhelming sentiment of the police in the City of Toronto and in most of the cities that I know in Ontario. They are strongly in favour of keeping the registry because they believe it saves lives, it protects them better, and they also believe that in situations, particularly domestic situations, it's an important source of protection, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Bourassa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask the member for Toronto Centre, because earlier we heard from the Conservative Party, they were talking about their majority, and when we know that the great majority of Canadians did not vote for them, that's one thing, but the worst thing is the fact that they are going to really set us back by destroying all the data. And I would like to ask my honourable colleague to talk to me a little bit about the importance of maintaining that data so that the other provinces, such as Quebec, can have their own registry rather than being stuck with this gang. The member for Toronto Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member for Bourassa, I'd like to quote Ms. Stoddard, who is the Privacy Commissioner. She stated clearly that there is nothing in the federal registry that would prevent the government from sharing the information with provincial governments. And that's contrary to the position taken by the government. It's counter to, in fact, the views of many others. Ms. Stoddard is the Privacy Commissioner, She's saying, as are other experts, that the government is wrong in the arguments that it's using in that situation, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.